Hi, this is Siddhi, and today we are going to talk about what to do when your child is diagnosed as being autistic. Okay, this video is primarily aimed towards parents who are newly diagnosed, but it should also work for parents, through the years for the first few years, and definitely work for parents in the later years. Some aspects of it will work for parents who have children who are older. Okay, so what happens when you get when you get autism diagnosis? All right, so the first thing that happens is, as parents, most of the parents tend to get overwhelmed, and they get scared, and they also are grieving. All right, how do these emotions come up? So these emotions come up because essentially, you as a parent, when you are in the during the pregnancy, when you're anticipating having a child, you're viewing your child, your perception of a child is whatever children that you have seen in your vicinity, which are essentially normal children. So you would for whatever reasons you have a child, you would be thinking about, my child is going to do A, my child is going to do B, like somebody else. Okay, and the autism diagnosis basically just breaks that. It says that, okay, you're not going to get those things, and the moment you have that, it's very normal to feel grief. It is very normal to feel sad because your dream or your expectation is gone away. Okay, secondly, it's also very normal to feel scared because it is now you're essentially left with no path. You don't know where you're going to be heading. You don't know where you're going to be going. So these are all normal emotions, and it's very important to accept those emotions in yourself and not sideline them. Okay, but the way to deal with the grief is going to be a normal process. It will sort of come in, come out, come in and come out throughout your life in many ways. Every single time there is some sort of way, some points of life that come in where you're faced with the differentness of your child. You are going to have that same grieving process again. It may not hit as intensely as it did when you first heard about it, but it will come up throughout. That's the reason why I said this is a process. It's that it, you need to uh, learn to identify and acknowledge and talk about and work about that grief for yourself as a person while you're working with your child. Okay, but the first thing, like I said, you have to take a deep breath, remind yourself that yes, we can deal with this. Okay, but how would you deal with it? So the deal with it, the first thing you need to do is you need to study your child. Now, if this is the reason why I have used Jane Goodall's video picture, for studying chimpanzees, because this is literally what you need to do. Now you're faced with a completely different types of species of person. Okay, not a species but a different type of person. So the best way to understand your child is to observe your child, to understand what you're supposed to be doing. What does he look like? And that's the reason why, if you see, the first video I had posted was about understanding your autistic individual, because if you don't observe them, you're not going to be able to understand them. If you try to, autism is not a condition that you're ever going to understand by just reading about it. You have to observe, you have to interact with autistic individuals. So the first part that you need to do is you need to study your child, just like an anthropologist would study animals or different species or different cultures. All right, then the second part you need to do is you need to read about autism, but you need to read about autism from an autistic person's perspective. The key point to remember is a parent typically is a neurotypical person. A neurotypical person and a neurodivergent person have very different brains. Their perceptions of the world is very different. So a parent being a neurotypical cannot understand what a autistic child and experiences. So the best way for you to understand what an autistic child experiences is to go and read books written by autistic individuals. And it's very this is literally the source through one of the big sources for me to for me to be able to connect with my children. Parents ask me that how do you go off and understand what they're communicating, how to engage with them. It's not really the therapy techniques that I have learned which has helped me. The therapy techniques are useful, but what has actually also helped me is the amount of reading that I've done, and how much I've interacted with people who are autistic, because they have given me an insight into what is their life experience. And when I understand, when I view the world from their perspective, is when I'm able to try to come up with what works best for them. Okay, so you need to read about experiences about autistic individuals from their perspectives, not experiences written by parents of autistic children, or not just experiences written by parents of autistic children and professionals. I'm not saying that those two are not relevant, they are, but they have their own purposes. Like a parent's perspective of autism is going to help you accept the grief, the confusion, the frustration that comes with having autistic child. A therapist or a professional's view of autism is going to give you insight into what is the what is the biology behind it, what is the learning style behind it, what is the cognitive development behind it. Okay, but all three together are going to give you are going to make you equipped. Just fixing on only one of them is not going to work out. Okay, so first you have to read, second you have to talk to people about different types of therapies that are there. Okay, so this is very important. That's the reason why the second article that I had put in was types of therapies, because many a times parents are not actually aware of all of the types of therapy techniques that are available for their children, and they kind of go into therapies blindly. Okay, once you've studied your child, then your next job is basically to list down all of the areas of concerns that you have, because in autism you don't have just one concern. It's an eclectic condition. It affects development in various areas. So you need to basically list down everything that your child is struggling with, and then you need to prioritize which is the one that you want to work on. So maybe you'll pick up the 1 2 3, like I pick up 1 2 3, and then once I pick up what I've ranked, that okay, this is my first three absolutely important ones that I want to work with. Discuss it with your pediatrician, discuss it with your developmental pediatrician, and then finalize the priority goals. Okay, once you have finalized the priority goals, is then when you again check back with the therapy techniques and figure out which therapy technique is the one which is going to give you the strategies, the techniques that are required for covering those goals. Okay, so once you do that, then you go and you work with the therapist. Like so say for example, when I am once my child is diagnosed and I have studied the child, and I think that no, I want my child to be able to understand what I'm saying. Okay, so which is the therapy technique that works? So I go back and I look at the different therapy techniques that are there. I identify which therapy technique is going to work, and I find out, okay, fine, ABA is working for me for that. Then I go and start with ABA. When I go and start with that technique, with that when I find a therapist, the first thing I would do is I would discuss my observations with the therapist, to see whether my observations are exactly what the therapist is seeing. Because keep in mind, the therapist is somebody who has a lot of experience and should ideally have a lot of experience, would definitely have more experience than you. So she would have her own perspective of viewing the child. So you need to talk to the parent, you need to talk to the therapist, understand what what is her perspective of it. Then you need to ask what is it that the goal that she's going to work, he or she is going to work with it. Now this is where it's very important for me to highlight to the parents that you need to work, your therapist are a team. Okay, later on your developmental pediatrician or your pediatrician, your therapist, later on your school, these are team. You guys are part of a team. Okay, you all should be on the same page. You cannot be on different pages when you're working with your children. So it's important, like just like when we go to work and we're working on a project, we keep in touch with our team members, we understand what our goal is, we ask for what is my job, and then we check back with the team members. That's the same thing that you're supposed to be doing with your child's work. So you are supposed to be discussing with the therapist, asking her what is the goal, asking for homework that she wants you to do. Then you need to tape the homework and then show it to her so that she can check it, that are you on the right track. And then ask for how long are we going to work on this, what if that goal is not worked out in that much time, then you need to review with the therapist, why is it not working out, do we need to do something else, do we need to explore some other options. That if you go through this process is only when you're going to be on an upward curve. You cannot brainlessly just let the therapist just do its own thing. Okay, parallel to this, what you need to do is you need to take care of yourself, because having an autistic child is having a child with special needs is always difficult, and autistic children are unique in that sense. They're very different and they require a lot of effort to understand and work with. Correct, because they're completely different as from mostly the neurotypical parents. So unless you're an autistic parent, in which case maybe you will be able to connect with the child better, but your own challenges may also sort of clash with your child's challenges. So that's also another factor that comes in. But that's the part that you need to review for yourself, that what is what is your status. So many parents, when they get a diagnosis initially, they will ask that, should I leave my job? And my answer to them is always that it's not a yes or a no. It's basically it's you the decision is for the parent after they have thought about various factors. So one of the factors that I always ask parents to think about is, what was your goal as a parent, okay, when you had a child? So here I'm going to be very upfront. Parents have children for various reasons. Okay, so some parents have children because they love children, they always wanted to be parents, they enjoy the process of bringing up an individual. There are some people who have children because society expected them to have children. There are some parents who have children because of the fact that it just happened. Okay, now why are these things important? Because the ones who sort of wanted to be parents, they understood the process, would be more aware of the fact that parenting was never supposed to be fun. Okay, it was supposed to be a challenging job. Bringing up a child is something that is most difficult and most frustrating, and once you finish with it, you should technically become like a saint. You have so many skill sets that you never had before you had a child, right? But if you have gone into the whole I'm having a child because of the fact that my society demands it, then you never probably you intended to invest as much, expected the amount of investment that a child requires. So if you did not expect the amount of investment that a child requires, it's going to be further more difficult when you have a special needs kid, and definitely far more when you have autistic kid. So it's important to review that part, because this is not a 1 hour 2 hour 1 day 2 day thing. It's a long haul. So instead of making drastic changes in your life, make changes which you're going to be able to accept on a long term piece. So say for example, a lot of mothers would be forced into just leaving their careers. If your career has been important, don't leave your career. If you need to take a gap, and come back, or you can recruit people to work with your child. Okay, you can train your carers in addition to you. You can use the people in your team, your husband, your mother-in-law, your nanny, everybody to work with your child instead of just taking everything on yourself. Okay, second part that you need to keep as a carer is to stay positive. This is something that I don't tell the parent to do, but I always do it for the parent. Is basically, you need to sort of maintain a diary for yourself where you note down the things that your child has gained as he grows older, because in many ways you're like a explorer. You are going into uncharted territory. So if, like a explorer who goes into who explores a new map, he or she will be marking every new thing that they find. The same way you have to mark every new thing that you find about your child. This keeps yourself in a positive mode, and it also tells you that you are going towards your goal. You're not getting lost. All right. Another thing that happens many a times with parents is that parents tend to feel guilty because they feel that they have made their children autistic. That's something that it's more a recent thing. It was there earlier too, and there was this concept of refrigerator moms being the reason for or having autistic child, years back, in the initial stages of study of autism. Moms, it was considered that autistic children develop because of children become autistic because of refrigerator moms, but none of that is true. The reality is that autistic children are born different, all right, and they tend to gravitate towards tech and mobiles and TVs a lot, and we need to sort of take extra effort to engage them, which is not true for normal children. It's a reality. You can't change that reality. Okay. Now, once you have done that, the next thing that I want you to just remember is that what are the signs that you have a positive support team. Okay, so the signs of a positive support team is, first, the team members should be willing to discuss with you. They don't look down on you. They look at you as an equal, as somebody who's a partner in the process. Okay. Second, since they're looking at you as an equal, they're willing to share goals with you. They're willing to share timelines with you. They're willing to give you homework. They're willing to check with you. They're not trying to tell you that, okay, leave the child with me, I will manage everything. That's a big red flag when you are working with professionals or support team, because that basically tells you that they don't see you as someone who is part of the process, and that doesn't work. At the end of the day, the child is yours. Okay, the child is going to land up with you. Keep in mind that this is something that I want parents and therapists, professionals to understand, that at the end of the day, the child ends up with the parents. If anything goes wrong, a therapist is least invested in the whole process. He or she can just basically put their hands up and say, okay, I can't work with this child, let me just work with the next child. But that luxury is not afforded to a parent. A parent cannot put his hand up and say, I cannot do anything with this child, let's just pass it all to the next parent. Okay, the parent is stuck with the child. So the person who is the most invested in the child is the parent. Also, secondly, what research has shown is that more than the different therapy techniques, what works the most is when the parent is invested in the child's therapy. Okay, where any kind of therapy technique, if the parent is invested, the gains are the fastest. All right, so keeping these two factors in mind, your support team has to be someone who should be taking you as an equal. Okay. Next, let's quickly go through the mistakes that parents do. Now, some of these I've already talked about earlier, so I'm not going to go into detail with these, but I just felt that I should put it together, because I realized from the feedback of the videos is that many parents are not able to understand how everything sort of comes together. All right. So let's go over the mistakes that parents make. Okay. First mistake is to get stuck in the denial stage or giving up. Now why did I say denial or giving up? Because those are basically two different things that happen in two different stages of development of the child. Okay. So many a times when the parent gets a diagnosis, the parent, so like I said, depression is part of grieving. Okay, it's part of the process of grieving, and you are going to go through this stage at multiple times in your life when you have autistic, any sort of special needs child, whether it's an autistic child or otherwise. All parents with special needs will have this process that they will go through. Now especially with this is more intense with autistic children's parents, because what happens is that the autistic child sort of looks normal in some phases and doesn't look normal in some phases. So the temptation is to sort of ignore the times when the child doesn't look normal and kind of focus on the times when the child looks neurotypical. All right. And that's a problem. So the denial, they tend to get stuck with the denial for a longest period of time. Second is when the child starts growing older, when the parent gets depressed because they feel that, okay, this is they get tired because it's intensive work, right, working with autistic child. The parent gets tired and then they feel like giving up. This is normal, and when you reach to this stage, your first instinct should be go back to the professional that you worked with, who you felt comfortable and connected with, who you felt was treating you as an equal, because this is the time when you need help and you need to look for the help. You can't let the depression sort of run your life at this moment. Okay. Next is looking for quick solutions. So many parents fail to accept the fact that autism is not a disease. It is a different brain. It's a different kind of brain. So you will find that there are many people who will be selling quick solutions for curing autism. Okay, and this is not something that is just people who are out to fleece off autistic parents. It's also professionals. Like, if you look at the research work that has been going over the years, most of the research has been looking for cure for autism, which is very funny, because if you think about it, if you really look into autism and autistic people, you will find that there are autistic people in computer science department, there are autistic people in physics department, there are autistic people in medical department, there are autistic surgeons. Now if you take, and the reason why they're so damn successful is because the autistic traits actually work for them. They make them more focused, they make them more able to think out of the box. They make them more successful. The autistic traits make them more successful. The whole internet and computers piece is being developed for a huge chunk by autistic people. So now if you go off and look at autism as a disease, then basically, if you did not have autism, you would have none of these things happening, right? You would have still been stuck in the caves. Correct. So autism is not a disease. It is a different kind of a brain. It requires a different kind of learning, and a quick solution for that is actually not something that is going to work out ever. Okay. Next, like we talked about this earlier too, outsourcing therapies. Many parents believe, and professionals encourage this concept, that you just leave the child to the therapist. And like we talked about earlier, this is not the right attitude, because when you bring a child into this world, even whether it is an autistic child or whether it is a normal child, you would not take a normal child and just dump him into the school and say, the school is going to manage whatever is there. No, there are certain things that the school is supposed to be teaching, and there are certain things, there's a huge chunk of the child's development that you are going to be teaching. Correct. So just dumping the child on the therapist is not going to work. All right. The other thing that a lot of parents do is acceptance for the parents is equal to basically giving up. Okay. Now I know this is not the way a lot of parents will view it, but I have seen a lot of parents who basically will not will only come up and work with therapists when they feel that there is some challenging behavior that they can't accept. Okay, they will not see that challenging behavior is a consequence of things that you have not taught the child. So say for example, many parents will come, bring their older children to us, and they will be like, okay, the child is extremely aggressive, I can't deal with him, he beats up, he breaks things, he thrashes things. But what they fail to realize is, why is that there? It's there because the parent has not worked on communication. Why has the parent not worked on communication? Because the parent feels that I can understand my child, so I don't need to make him communicate. And we talked about the fact that communication is something children on the autistic spectrum don't aggressively work on. They prefer to, it is a huge area that needs to be taught to the child on the autistic spectrum. So this is where there is a sort of error that a parent makes, is that where they don't understand, except where parents need to understand is that acceptance means you understand the person and teach in the way they want, in the way they need to be taught. Acceptance does if you are just letting the child do whatever he or she wants and then complaining about the child, that is called feeling pity for the child. Pity is not acceptance. All right. So next part that parents do is comparing autistic children with other autistic children. We have gone over this in detail in the Understanding Autistic Individuals video, but this is something that you need to keep in mind. You cannot compare autistic children at all. That's always going to lead you to getting a false impression. So basically, if you're lucky enough to, so one factor that you need to keep in mind is that most of the level ones, the parents and the children will never share the fact that they are autistic. So you're essentially, if you're talking to people who are talking about their children being autistic, you're essentially just talking to people who are level 2s and level 3s. That's first part. As a newly diagnosed parent, if you just end up talking to level 2s and level 3s, you're done. You're going to sink into depression. Secondly, if you're talking to only autistic, if you're comparing yourself, what would happen is you need to keep in mind that the techniques have changed. Like in the 25 years that I have worked with my with autistic children, initially the children I worked with did not have access to ASCs. They did not have access to visual schedules. They did not have access to any play techniques or any of this sort of stuff that we have right now. So those children are obviously going to be more limited than what my children with the same similar deficits would be right now. Okay, so looking at them and basically deciding your child's future right now is leading to depression. So don't compare your autistic children, but what you want to do is you want to talk to the parent, because the parent is going to tell you is going to be a good person who understands your struggles, your worries, your anxiety, because a parent of autistic child cannot share those experiences with a parent of a neurotypical child, right? Because they're completely different. So here the parents work as a support, but you do not go and compare your children with each other. Okay, the other part that parents, which is connected to the previous part, is getting stuck with fads. Fads are basically these flash therapies that come in and they go. Okay, so like over the years, in my 25 years, the first one that I came across was the mercury causes autism wala piece. So there was a fad therapy called chelation that was there when I began, when in my first years. Then there was this massage by gold gold boiled oil, which was sold. Then there was stem cell therapy. Then there was this really horrendous therapy technique, which was where they used to give hydrochloric acid enemas to the children, to get rid of faulty bacteria in the gut. Okay. the current fad is the stem cell therapy still continues as a fad. The current fad is basically that OT is a cure for everything. Although OT as a therapy technique is definitely useful for children on the autistic spectrum, but it is not the cure for everything. Okay, so basically, of the whole lot of fads that I've seen over the years, OT is probably the least of the concerns currently for me. But the point is that a fad is something that comes up, and parents always try to this is where parents sort of tell each other about it, and sort of discuss about it and promote these, and a lot of times these fads are horrendously expensive and they're very hugely publicized, like homeopathy for autism, ayurveda for autism, especially in India, pujas for autism, uh, and what parents fail to realize is that an autistic child is a child, so he or she is developing as as time goes by. Uh, Over that, you have work that you're doing with the child, your therapist is doing with the child. So if any sort of fad or any sort of therapy technique is supposed to be showing results, it should show results above that. Okay, and if you check any of these therapy techniques, any of these fads that people talk about, they will never give you any clear sign of what is working. They will say, there will be some improvement, the symptoms will become milder, but they'll never give you a quantitative measure. That is a red flag. You should not be falling for those kind of things, because A, they're expensive. Okay, B, they you as a parent, you only have a limited amount of energy. If you invest your energy into a fad, you're going to take that energy away from or from a teaching opportunity. And number three, you may actually end up abusing your child, like when the fad of the hydrochloric acid bit was going on, or stem cell therapy was going on, or for the matter chelation was going on. It was traumatic because the child was going through medical procedures, and mostly it was done with children who were non-verbal, correct? Because those are the parents who are the most panicking in terms of willing to try anything. And the child had no way to tell that what was happening, to him, how he was feeling about what was being done to him. So it was essentially abuse which the parent was doing for the child out of care, so you should not be getting into this sort of a thing as much as possible. Similarly, blind trust. Blind trust is something a lot of parents will do. They'll just take one therapist and they'll sort of be like, okay, fine, I trust her, she's going to do everything for me. I am not saying, and this is connected to the point that I was talking about, that your therapist is a normal person, just like you. You need to sit with your therapist and talk to her, find out are you still on the same page with your understanding and her understanding? What is her logic when she's asking you to do something? Whether that logic is working. You need to, you're a team. So you cannot blindly, like you would never blindly trust your team member. You'll always discuss and work with a person the same way you shouldn't be doing that with your therapist too. Okay, another thing that parents make a mistake, and we've talked about this earlier also in the other videos also, so I'm going to briefly go over it, is that parents get stuck in the normality trap. So this is connected to the faulty view that many parents and professionals have of viewing autism as a disease. Uh, so you want to basically take out the autism and make the person normal. That is a faulty thought process. Autism is a different kind of brain, and basically saying that I don't want my child to be autistic is essentially saying that I take out his brain and replace it with another brain. So we know that is not possible to do, correct? Next is finding a right match of therapy and goal. Now this is something that a lot of parents and professionals sort of make a mistake with. Fresher professionals and parents make a mistake with is they tend to So many a times parents take children for therapy, obviously, but they since they don't invest time in talking to the therapist, and therapists also don't invest time in talking to the parents, there is always a mismatch. So if you're working on, say for example, speech, you're not necessarily working on attending and social behavior. Okay, if you're working on OT, you're definitely not working on speech and language and communication. If you're working on academics, you're definitely not going to get engagement and independence. So your therapies are directly connected with what goals you want. So more details of this are present in the therapies, types of therapies video. I would suggest you go and check that out. Okay, next. The other thing a lot of older parents will do is what is called as I know my child, and this is one of the things that I find very frustrating as a therapist, because many parents will come up and tell me, I will tell you what my child is like, and you answer the questions for me. And what parents fail to understand is that a parent is a subjective viewer of a child, and this is not just true for autism, it's for anything. Like as a my primary training is in counseling, and as a counselor I would never counsel my own child. Why? Because I am part of his life. Okay, the same way a parent of an autistic child is part of his life. Many observations are in reaction to many observations of behaviors are in reaction to the parents involvement. You need a person who is going to be objective, someone who has no connection with the child, no emotional attachment with the child, who is not syncing with the child constantly. Okay, and this is something that is something that you need a professional for, because most of the time when you have an autistic child, you develop what is called as a fused relationship with the child, where you and the child feel are very 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 are too close, so much so that your life is overlapping with each other. Okay, the moment you have a fused relationship in any kind of a relationship, whether you're talking about a marital relationship or you're talking about a child and a parent relationship, that's unhealthy. Okay, you are not going to be able to see what is actually happening to be able to solve anything. So you need to be able to step back. Also, most of the professionals are people who have basic training in in some form of development. So OTs will have training in fine motor development and overall motor development. Speech therapists will have training in speech and language development of children. Okay, so they have their basic training, and in addition to that they have been working with different kinds of people. If you like I said, I'm 25 years into this field, but when I began in 2000s, I did not know anything. I had finished almost, I think, 5 years of 7 years of study of child development, but I still did not know enough to be able to generate. I had to go through 10 years of, after that, working with different professionals, working with children, to come to the stage that I'm right now. And even now, I would say I'm still learning. Okay, so this cannot happen by just giving birth to a child and bringing up a child. All right. Next, medications. Medications for autism, my ground rule is that you should give medications only after your teaching and accommodation has been done. So this is where a lot of times parents and professionals tend to miss, is that if you are, so autism is a different kind of a brain. So you should be, what does a different kind of brain mean? That you should be giving them accommodation. Like if you have a blind person, and the blind person needs braille to read, so you're going to give him braille. Okay, you're not going to give him medication and then expect him to be able to read. All right, so basically same way, if a person has physical disability, you're going to give them the ramp that is required to walk. Okay, you're going to give them accommodations. The same way an autistic person requires certain accommodations, you give them that accommodations, you teach them different skills. And after that, if you still have issues that you want to deal, if you've not been able to solve, then you should be going for medication. Okay, having said that, for me, the general ground rule for any parent is first, these first three things that I feel all parents have to address, come what may. First is communication. Okay, communication is something you should be working with your child the day you get your diagnosis, and that communication can be using ASEs, with ASEs, with speech. I don't care, but communication is not a luxury. It is something that you should be doing with your child constantly, because that is the only way you're going to be able to understand the child's perspective. Just assuming that I understand my child, so my child doesn't have to communicate, is not the way to go. You wouldn't like if somebody did that to you. You shouldn't be doing that to your child. Second thing that you should be working towards is, all parents should be working towards, is listening. Autistic children do tend to get very, very, very overloaded with auditory input. It's like a general thing across all autistic children. So the instructions that you give them have to be short and have to be given at a short distance and with minimal repetitions. In fact, I would prefer without repetitions. And if you see my visual schedules videos and my if you see my visual schedules videos, you'll realize how I replace that, I resolve that issue. But the other thing you have to do with listening is stick to one language. Many parents do this thing where, especially in India, the parents are talking one language, the therapist is talking another language, and the school is talking a third language. You can't have three language running with the child at one point of time, when the child inherently has a language deficit as part of his challenges. You should stick to one language, and everybody has to teach in that language across all places that are there. Okay, lastly, every parent has to focus on his ADLs. Autism, there is no reason for, unless the child has motor planning issues, there is no reason for autistic individual not to have his ADLs, activities of daily living, at par to his age. Okay, many autistic children who do not have severe motor planning issues are actually advanced in terms of their ADLs, because they inherently want to be independent. So this is something the parents have to focus on, and it has to be something that it will keep on evolving as the child grows older. Okay, so to conclude, uh, when you get a diagnosis of your child being autistic, you need to keep in mind that yes, you're looking at something that is different. Like, say for example, like you were planning to go to Goa, but your flight lands you up at Kashmir. Okay, if you keep on thinking about Goa, you're going to miss the beauty of Kashmir. Okay, so you want to remember that even your autistic child, yes, he or she is different, but he or she is also very, very, very interesting. If you take time to understand, connect, engage with your child, you will be able to see the beauty that autism is. All right, thank you.